Recording.
Tabelo, how
Cool.
are you doing?
I'm always good, my man. I'm always good. How are you doing?
I'm a bit tired, just got back from gym, but I'm okay. What are you gonna do?
What is that thing? You can not go to gym, so you're not tired. There's like a lot of things you can do, but I guess that's a what do you call it? A difference of opinion. What
It
do you
is it
value and
is a
what do you not?
difference of opinion between me and you. I've been trying to get you to exercise, I think, for about a year now, and you're having none of it.
Yeah, look, like I said, you're doing the gym, you're wasting the energy. I'm doing the resting, I'm conserving the energy.
When
Systems in balance.
when I have to accompany you to the doctor in 10 years, I want you to repeat those words.
Yeah, look, of course, I'll be having my first child then. So, of course, you're more than welcome to accompany me.
I'm happy to leave this point here and then jump on to today's topic.
Yes,
I
please.
wanted to talk about something that a lot of people take for granted. And the reason why it's taken for granted is going to be obvious in a second. But I want to start by saying that you and I cannot take morality for granted because both of us are completely secular. So we don't have an external standard that we can look to try and define our morality and to try and define our actions. We need to look elsewhere in order to get a sense of how we ought to act in all the various circumstances of life. The last time we spoke, you were speaking about going to church. I don't know if you've had a change of hearts around faith and religion. Maybe you're on your way to starting a church. Maybe you're on your way to becoming a member of one. But
Yeah,
I knew you as somebody who's secular. And I think that's a
yeah,
good place to start, right? So, a lot of people's intuition and a lot of people's standards about how they ought to act comes from either religious authorities, religious texts, and even the guidance that we receive at home, I think, about how we ought to act is guided and modeled after the scriptures of various religions. And barring that, it's deeply steeped in traditions and the norms surrounding whatever culture you grew up in. So, not having those standards and not having those guidelines, where do you turn to for your moral framework? And what is your moral framework? What informs it? What are things that are important to you? What sort of person are you? And yeah, what moral standards do you hold and why?
yeah. Look, I actually, I'll maybe, I was thinking of this in a different way, right? I said to someone, do humans actually feel that something is wet, or do their receptors tell them that the temperature has dropped, therefore assume that it is wet, right?
Can you explain that
So,
differently?
yeah. So to say, like your point when you raise like things like religion, authority figures,
Mm-hmm.
um, cultures, traditions, even let's not even take for granted the society in which we live at the time that in which we live it
Mm-hmm.
is all a conducive manner of what do you assume as right. And it's always that case of saying it becomes very difficult to judge people in the past for what they did for present day standards,
Mm-hmm.
right? So to this point, I can tell you I am a there's a I think it's in Switzerland if I'm not mistaken. They believe it's euthanasia, where if you just want to die, you can go into that place and they just take your life. And I think for now, it's still limited to people with critical illnesses,
Mm-hmm.
but they're working on expanding the model where someone
Mm-hmm.
says, "I've checked out in life, I want nothing else."
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'll be honest to say, what is right is actually informed by that, right? My own family, that's my basis of all things. My exposure in the life that I live in the CBD, so I also come into contact with people of different cultures, and it's a high
Mm-hmm.
speed velocity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you pick and choose, you run multiple experiences, like does this work, does this not work? And as someone I believe who tries to be less wrong over time, I
Mm-hmm.
think my core belief is, how do I know what I'm doing is wrong, and next time how do I make a better decision? Because I don't think there is a state in which what you're doing throughout your entire life will constantly be right. If that
Sure.
answers your question.
It is hinting at an answer, but you haven't gotten to the crux of it, right? So when you're running that
Yeah.
test of is this thing that I'm doing or I'm about to do wrong or right, then what gives you the feedback? Is it the reaction of the people around you when they say, ouch, you have hurt me? Or is it something else that happens within yourself, like rationally and emotionally, that gives you the feedback about whether your actions have been right or wrong?
Yeah, look, I want to actually run a good thought experiment because you make a very good point here.
Mm,
And I think I want to apply one that everyone relates to, right? And I think we had this chat multiple times. It's the issue of monogamy and polygamy,
mm,
right? That
mhm,
right there is a question of morals, ethics, worldview that people are very heated about,
mm,
right? And I think I'll use your words on this one. You said human understand that in all relationships, in
mm,
all interactions with everything, there is no single source of fulfillment. That's why you
mm,
have more than one friend, more than one best friend. That's why companies are built around more than one people. That's why ecosystems exist in multiple collaborations because they understand that they need more than one thing,
mm,
right? It is when humans get to romantic relationships,
mm, mm.
that they completely abandon all logic that they've understood that relationships cannot work with one person.
Yeah, it's the only human relationship that we try to have one on one, where else with all our other relationships, it's many to many, right? As you said, we have many
Yes.
siblings, we have many friends, and we don't think that the existence of equivalence diminishes the thing that we have with any one person. But like curiously, romantic relationships are the exception.
Yeah, and that right there is a good point, right? As you're raising right now to say, now maybe the question is there, right? And you make a good point. Does society, as a person, then, how does it affect me? I think
Mm,
for me, it's always um, it's like a utility function.
mhm,
Does this make me feel good? Does this make me feel bad? Why
mhm,
does it make me feel? Why does it make me feel bad? The
mhm,
people I'm interacting with, what is this? What is their steel man argument, right?
mm,
Because you need to be able to argue the other person's steel man
mm,
to be able to say thank you. It's like that funny joke that says when someone gives you feedback, you don't always have to take it. You can
mm.
say, Linda, I've thought about your feedback. It doesn't work for me on my personality. But however, thank you.
Yes, yes. And
So that
before, sorry, before I don't want to interject too much, but I do think you need to explain the concept of steel manning versus the concept of straw manning. So when one is steel manning, what are they doing? And when they're straw manning, what are they doing?
cool. So when you steel man someone's argument, is that you're simply saying Linda Lane has this point of he believes in a monogamous relationship that one to one is the best way for everything, right?
Hmm,
And you go down the whole list of why Linda Lane believes in that argument, and you make that argument so strong
hmm,
that you technically say, if I was a proponent of this faith and belief,
hmm,
these are all the things that stand for it, and whether good or bad, this is the complete argument for it.
hmm, hmm. So you are
But when you
representing the argument in a way that the person who is adopting that position would agree with. You're not
yes,
attacking the weakest version of that argument. Yeah.
exactly. But when you straw man, you just simply look for like a single argument within the collection of the ideology, right?
Mm,
A like a good example of this, to this example we're using, someone might say in polygamous relationships, um, the issue is that once there's many people, illness exists, and they'll just
mm,
literally drill down on that single point. They will not,
yes.
they will negate everything around it, but they'll just
Mm,
simply
mm,
say, or maybe I can say, yeah, to your point, to say, for me, I need to sit down and steel man the other person's argument to myself.
mhm.
There is, of course, a bias that I'm arguing with myself on that
Yeah.
thing. And I assume myself to be rational and smart enough to say, yeah, no, Teps, you have defended this. Shout
Mm,
out to ChatGPT and AI. Maybe we can now use that for that. But it's to say, I need to sit down with other person's argument and
mm,
sit down and say, they have made this point. They are making this point.
Mm-hmm.
Why do they make it? Why do they believe it? But it is not for me to try and convert them to my point. I never come to someone's morality with the change of, I want to convert you. I come to them and say,
Hmm.
let me hear what your beliefs are.
Sure.
Maybe there's parts of it I like this part.
Mm,
Clip,
mm.
and I'll move on.
That's really interesting. So, do you then not believe that there are positions that people can adopt that are wrong, you know? So you apply whatever standard that you apply to whatever they are doing or whatever they are thinking, and then you say, by my assessment, by my moral framework, I think what you are doing is wrong, and the right action to do in this situation is this other thing. So you never approach things from that perspective, regardless of what you are seeing.
So it's a very, there comes a very, what is it? A very interesting point about the imprisonment of reputation, right? Like institutional reputational risk and the prisons they create around people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, See this a lot, especially when people are in us, the brand is seen to be linked to something, right? It's very hard for priests when they have to be asked about LGBTQ issues because
Mm-hmm.
people will say, but the Bible does not support it. So the
Mm,
priest is now locked in. If he says the one argument, the staunch church believers believe that he no longer represents the church or is no longer a follower of God,
mm.
right? So it's always, I always kind of ask, that's what I'm saying, like it's always interesting to see in which sphere you meet people.
Mm.
You can have the best argument for um, pro-choice,
Mhm.
pro-life. Is it called pro-life?
It's both. So pro-life is people who are against abortion. Pro-choice is people who believe in the autonomy of like women's autonomy, and they like
Yes,
abortion should be permitted.
yes. You can have the best argument for pro-choice, but if
Mm.
you're having that in a stance church of traditional Christian uh, commandment of the scripture, there's
Mm.
nowhere that argument is going to go
Agreed.
because
Agreed. There's
it's
a
dead
standard you
set what
cannot
God said.
violate that is set in stone, right?
Exactly.
Mm.
So your question becomes, what do you want? Where are the frontiers where you can terraform new
Mm-hmm.
ideas
Mm.
and merge them? And that is why maybe things like schools, varsities, mainly varsities,
Mm.
uh, it's kind of tricky in workspaces
Mm-hmm.
because always a delicate balance. But when elections come, we can always try and throw it in there. Just say, what do you think about this? Because it's election
Mm.
season. Everyone's asking, who are you voting for? You can say, "Ish,
Mm.
I
Mm.
like K's view on this, I like VF plus view on that. But the EFF has me here. You see, you
I'll tell you
can
today for free. Whenever you're asked the question of who you're voting for at work, don't answer it unless you have a friend at work. It's a trap. But go on. You will be
that's
punished
why you
for
say what you're voting
it.
for. I like the position of on this matter. I like the
Yes.
position of on this matter. So I'm saying that's the best time to that's the greatest what is it? The best way to end the family dinner is to ask about religion and politics.
And
Because
money.
the family and bad, yeah. Yeah. No, but religion and politics, the family dinner, it's
Yeah.
over. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So
but yeah,
so
go ahead.
I think I understand your position, and I think you are actually way more generous and understanding than I am, right? I think I do take some of your attitude towards people's moral positions where I'm like, let me at least hear the person out. Let me hear what they have to say. But in me hearing them out, I do definitely have a standard and a framework that I'm judging them against. And I do have an opinion about how they ought to act, right? So
Yeah.
let me maybe share where my moral intuitions come from, right? And
Yes.
where I actually feel justified in judging other people, right? I'm
You
going to
need to
start
justify
with
it.
the judging other people part because it's a simpler thing, right?
Yeah.
As long as whatever a person is doing does not affect anybody else negatively, I will endorse it, even if it doesn't make sense to me And this is controversial, even if it harms them. If they are of sane mind, they are competent, they're informed about what they are doing, and it doesn't, affect anyone else. I don't know why I need to be against that, right? A person has a right to swing their fist wherever they want to swing it. As long as their right to swing their fist ends where my nose begins, I'm happy, right? Swing away. And then how do I feel justified in judging them if I say at the same time that they have the freedom to act however they want to act? Well, people do tell us what their goals are, right? So people are going to tell you that I'm trying to get fitter. They're going to tell you that I'm trying to eat healthier. They're going to tell you that I'm trying to get a degree. Where their actions are going against their stated goals, I think now you begin to have a way to criticize what they are doing. So if you, as I said, I was coming from the gym, you see me stuffing my face with a pizza every day. I think you are well within your right to say, Lindelani, you are acting against your own stated interests. And that happens all the time where people deviate from their own stated interests. And I don't know why we shouldn't judge them according to their own standards. That to me seems like a contradiction that cannot be squared. But people think you can't judge people even by their own standards, which is confusing to me. Now, going back to the first thing, where do my moral intuitions come from if there is no place to go to try and find the guidance? Actually, there is a place to go to, and the place is rationality and philosophy, right? That's where I find my answers. But I think that is putting it in a way that's way too over the top. It's actually more simpler than that. No, I define evil as the suffering of human beings, right? So whenever human beings are suffering, there is the presence of evil there. And whenever human beings are thriving, there is goodness and there is whatever we need to promote to lead to a better society, right? So then my moral framework is actually like that's the foundation, that's the basis of my moral framework. We should support everything that leads to human flourishing, given that doesn't offend or impose on other people's rights. We should oppose everything that leads to the suffering of human beings. And there are nuances that we can go into there, but that's the foundation. And then the philosophy part that I overlay onto the definition of good and evil is I am a consequentialist, right? So that is just a position that, actually intentions for the most part don't matter. What matters is the outcome of things, right? It doesn't matter what your intentions or how good they are. If you end up killing an innocent person, we should judge you according to the outcome of that behavior. That doesn't mean that we should punish you according to the crime or to the loss that has happened. It just means that, like, in terms of whether what you did is good or bad, we look at the harm or the good that you've created. And then take it a step further. I'm a consequentialist, and the specific kind of consequentialist that I am is a utilitarian. So then utilitarianism is the moral position that we should go or do what's going to create the most good for the greatest number of people. And now
Yes.
enter the debate that went on for a long time during COVID. The setup where there is a train on a track and it's heading for five people. And then you, as an agent witnessing that, have the power to pull a lever and switch the train
Yes.
to kill one person. Should you act? Everybody's familiar now with that
Yeah.
setup. So then, because I'm a utilitarian, it condemns me to saying I need to act and switch the track. And the calculus there is easy, right? If all we care about in that scenario are lives, then we should do the thing that gives us the greatest number of lives, because lives are the game that we are playing in the first place. So, whatever game we're playing, we maximize the thing that we care about, regardless of what the thing is. I'm not going to make judgments and pronouncements about what you should value. But given whatever thing you are valuing, you should act in a way that maximizes that. That said, I am not a strict utilitarian. There are scenarios where I'm like, you know what? This thing is taking it too far, right? Should you kill one man, harvest his organs so that you can save five patients in the hospital? I would not take it that far. But that summarizes my moral intuitions
Don't
and what
believe in
informs
yourself.
most of my.
You don't believe in yourself. You see right there, you don't believe in yourself. That right there is a violation of the self. I'm judging you by your intentions and your consequences. You let five people die, scientist, artist, engineer. Society will suffer because you saved one person. But maybe here's a different question then. When you, because I think the one thing about morals and ethics, I think we had this chat where like people argue ethics and get to work at 8, but will argue for an extension on the deadline because the one guy who always comes at work at 11 a.m. gets his job done, leaves, and when everyone wants the work, he's done. I think we once had that chat.
Mhm.
I'll maybe try extend this issue of morals, ethics that you're trying to raise into something that everyone interacts with. The
Mm,
law, right?
mm, mm,
The law in itself is a social contract that which we all agree to abide by. That's why I said one thing that you must not negate is the issue of the society in which you exist also shapes some of these things, right?
mm,
And maybe when I look at when you raise this issue for me for ethics, and I think to myself, a fast step back for me when you raise the question of ethics is under which guise of the social contract are we now all operating under,
mm,
right? Because you raise a good point where you say, if someone does not, it doesn't affect my nose, the famine in Sudan then should not affect you. You should not be saying free Palestine, right? We should not have things like the ICJ, the ICC, where a country can take another country, like we're doing in South Africa with Israel, to say, you are committing an atrocious crime.
mm,
We know this because under war crimes, you're committing, what is
mm.
it? It's genocide, this,
Genocide,
that, right?
yeah. Mm,
Yes. And Sudan, we're saying the capitalist system that under which we live today is
mm,
exacerbating inequality to points where there are countries such as the following that are being deprived, that are
mm,
leading people in those countries to these extremes,
mm,
right? But the only way we can remedy all of that is
mm,
that we have the social contract of
mm,
which we all then agree that certain things are wrong, right? We either, if we opt into living in a
mm.
sovereign state, opt into that. If we opt out of that, then you can go live on, I think even worse, like even on space, there's laws, like in
So
the
wait,
space station,
I
right?
have to ask here. So there is the social contract as it exists, however it came about, right? And then
Yes,
there is the social contract as the ideal, as it should be to deliver most justice to everyone on earth.
yes.
How then do we determine what that social contract is? Is it through a democratic system? Is it through a panel of experts that come together and they understand something
I
about
love it.
well-being? Is it a combination of the two?
I love it because there's a very good point that you're raising here. I think that we started with. How do we know?
Hmm,
And I'll take a very simple example of that we all agree on.
hmm.
Because America was the winner of the Second World War, it created a colony of the mind of what these values are that we all must aspire by.
But wait, to be accurate, I think here it helps to be accurate. It wasn't just America, it was like the alliance powers,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, but we America won it. We can argue about World War II. There's
Okay,
enough
cool.
people for that.
I think for
Was
the sake of
by
argument, let's say America won because I see what you're doing. I see what you're getting at.
Yes.
Cool.
America then said, as the winner, I will set the tone of engagement and the
Hmm,
social contract.
hmm,
Democracy, anti-dictatorship, anti-communism,
hmm,
what is it, liberal markets. These are all now America said this is the social contract.
hmm,
I will also then say, based on the social contract, whatever the thing is, right? That
hmm,
is we can then say that was the mind virus that America spread across the world.
hmm.
And we can argue and disargue about it, but it is the way in which we all interact. That is the moral standard of which we all agree,
Can I
right?
interject here and say something? There is a fact of the matter about how that moral standard is going to affect people, right? So if you are saying democracy and not dictatorships, and you implement a country with a democracy and you implement a country with a dictatorship, it's not that like well-being will be equal on both countries. There is going to be a
Yes.
country where people are flourishing and they're doing well. There's going to be a country where people are not, and we can compare. So the fact
Good.
that like
Let's
there's
compare America and Singapore. One democracy, one dictatorship. The
Singapore,
quality of life.
Singapore is an exception. Singapore is a
No, 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 no.
small, it's a small city state. It's a small city
Wait, wait.
state.
We are saying
It's
dictatorship and democracy.
homogeneous. It's homogeneous, right? And
So you're
also it's a
quantifying
sort of
it now.
it's also like a limited dictatorship. It's not a dictatorship in the same sense that like the Soviet Union was. I think all that nuance starts to matter. But go
Which
ahead.
is good.
Sorry,
But
let
which
me
is
not
good.
interject too much. Go ahead.
But that's my point. Right? You're coming to this point now that says we then say these are things we like, these are things we don't like. But we all sort of agree on that. We all like democracy, we all like capital markets, we all like capitalism, all these weird things that espouse freedom, vaguely used. I'm going to throw the word freedom, democracy here without definition to say, by the notion of which, whatever it is, that's it, right? Today, we then have a question that people are now saying, well, America espouses these values to the world, but does not abide by them. It's not a member of the, what is it? What's the ICC or something like I forget what it's called.
International Criminal Court.
It yes, I forget what it's called, but there's something a Roman statute. I think it's called the Roman statute, where if some criminal flies into your country, you must arrest them. But doesn't matter the terms and
Yeah, I
conditions.
think I know what you're talking about. That's like diplomat.
Yes, if you
Anyway,
sign
yeah.
up, yeah, yeah. America is the biggest sales of weapons, but it's also on the UN vetoing when people want to annex Palestine and Israel. Whatever. So people start saying, wait, man, you're espousing all these values, but you do not live by them, which comes to your point, right? To say, now people are saying, no, wait. The social contract of which we now all agree on, the moral ethical fiber that we all say is right or wrong, is clearly not right. We must now rejig it. Now, when you start rejigging things, you have this question that now comes out today where you have these fascists, right wings, left wings, staunch believers of this and that and that. And then the question then you and me are now asking on this issue of ethics and morality, and which in end, for me, I think drive the social contract or the law, is on what basis do we then sit down and come back together and say, this is the basis that which you all expect everyone to abide by?
Yes.
Yes, in the land you can judge him for eating pizza after jogging. In the says, but look, I do my 10-kilometer run, I burn 1,000 calories, I eat pizza, the world is in harmony. You say,
Sure, but then I do actually want you to answer that question about in what basis do we then come
yes,
together and determine the social contract? What's the mechanism that gives us a competent and just social contract that, I can't even say respects people's rights because there are people who believe that people should not have rights and they should live according to some guidelines that were written thousands of years ago. So then help me navigate that landscape. You are saying social contract is important. You don't get to define your own personal morality. You need to negotiate
yes.
with society. How do we set that?
Yeah, look, I'll tell you the best answer that I got for now is I don't know. The
Okay.
only way we've been able to do it so far is through war. War is the only way that it has been done, or excessive violence is the only way that it has been done throughout history. Because once you conquer someone, you can redefine their notions of going forwardness, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes.
That is why the first thing after you've been conquered, they destroy all your libraries and your history to say, this no longer exists. We are now starting afresh on our template.
So that's interesting though, because it also depends. I see what you mean. So the victor of a war gets to impose their culture. Okay, let's not even say be specific about what they get to impose, because that's the point I'm trying to make. But they get control over the conquered people, and then they have the
Yes,
power to do with them as they will, right? And I
yes,
hesitate to say that like they impose their way of life because there are important exceptions. When Genghis Khan was conquering Asia, he actually let people keep their religion, which is not the typical way that most conquerors do. Because he was like, I'm happy to have the religion that I have, and then I'm happy to leave people to practice whatever religion that they want, right? And he conquered a lot of of known Europe, as not known Asia at the time. So
Yes.
then, depending on the moral framework of the conquerors, you can have your culture taken away, or you can just be
Yes.
conquered, and then you are allowed to keep certain ways of your life, right? And that's not to say that you have control over your life. I'm just saying that, like, depending on the morality of the person who is assuming control over you, your life can be much, much worse, or your life can be just a little bit worse than it was before you were
Yeah.
conquered. So
And
the
you
moral
make a very
framework that the agent
of
that conquers you brings does matter a lot. I don't want to gloss over
yeah.
that.
Yeah, like it's a very good point. And I'll make two examples here. I'm gonna
Hmm.
start with one that's very interesting.
Mhm.
You know the Wagner group, right? That private army thing.
I've heard
The
vaguely
Wagner
of it. Please go ahead and explain.
But anyway, the Wagner Group or Wagner Group, whatever how it's a private army that essentially is from Russia, right?
Mhm.
And essentially, it's a private mercenary army that gets sent all over the world to do war on whoever's bidding.
Who
So if
who who
you've got a bid,
bids? Who bids the government, or can the private sector also
anyone,
bid? Oh, so if you have
it's a
the
private
money,
army.
okay,
Yeah, if you've got the money, they'll go to war in a country and secure your mines for you, right?
originating from Russia.
Yes, the origins are from Russia. Now, there's a very tricky thing there because also the state can use that very army for its own end goals to meet a certain thing. But
So
because
the
it is
Russian
assumed,
state, that is.
yes,
Okay.
the Russian state can use it for its own end goal,
Mhm.
right? But because it's assumed to be autonomous, it gets away with it.
Sure,
Make
but
sense?
then this is interesting. So if there's a group of mercenaries, how do they access the countries where they need to do their job, right? So you're a mercenary now. How are you coming into the country?
How do you get cocaine into South Africa when there's border control?
So this is what I'm trying to
There's no,
understand. Is
there's
this
no
is this is this
mistake
a
here.
is this I'm trying to understand if this is a sanctioned legal thing, or is it like smuggling drugs into a country, and then if you want to go and hire them, you can't just go on a website and say three mercenaries, please. There are other channels that you need to go to.
But we all know now you can go online. Like we had that paper was saying you can go online and hire someone for a hit and just say it's a gig job to go prank Lindelani. Right? Technology has allowed that to be.
Sure, sure, but I'm trying to understand the actual legality of it, not the loopholes that people have. I'm saying, what is the legal status of this army, right, in their own country, and then how does that, you know, interact with the laws and with like other countries and their legal systems? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, we can run we can run mostly where the guys are deployed is where there's no legal the country is unstable or there's a portion of the
Ah,
region that's unstable.
makes sense. Say no more. I'm answered.
Yeah.
So I do want to say that, like, we are almost out of time, and I think let's close down this episode, which we'll call part one, and then
Yeah.
let's go into part two, where we'll maybe clarify a bit of the thing, some of the things that we've said, or maybe even go further into the rabbit hole. I myself favor going a bit further into the rabbit hole, but I am also aware that, like, the subject matter of morality is very personal, and it's one of
Yeah.
those things that, like, touches us dearly when we feel like it's violated. So we do need to be careful, but also
Yeah.
careful while speaking not our truth, but the truth, because it's an objective thing.
Yeah. I think let's hold on for part two. But you make a good point there. But like I said, you should hire the private army and take over a country. Maybe you will have the opportunity to enforce your moral framework of judging people in that country, right?
I have no ambitions to conquer the world, only ambitions to conquer myself.
Said like a liar. That's why I say when people say things like that, they're lying.
Actually, that's another thing that is an important value to me that I think maybe we can open with in part two. I actually just generally don't lie because I made a
Ah,
commitment. I made a commitment to myself to just be a truth teller, right?
yeah,
And I'm gonna talk about what that means and how it plays out practically. Because there are all these situations and scenarios where we are thrown, where it becomes practically impossible not to lie. But we can dice
Cool.
that steak when we get there.
Okay, cool. I'll see you for part 2.
See you on.
Cheers.